Wednesday, October 20th, 2021.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have minutes?
No.
All right, you want to do the investment board meeting first, or would you like to go, Hank?
Do we want a motion to refer the bids to planning that we just?
Well, we weren't in session formally when that opened, so I don't think we have to do that, right? Is that correct?
That's what I think.
I
That's
think
what I
we
was
would, wouldn't we? Is it to planning or to facilities?
This would be the regional planning because it's CDBG.
When we've done bid openings before without the board, we don't
do a motion.
We just, well, we do accept it the next meeting,
Okay.
so we probably should do something.
All right, so
accepting
make a
bid.
motion to accept the bids and turn them over to regional planning for their review.
Second.
Mr. Sheniga?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Mr. Schaffner?
Motion to recess into the Investment Advisory Board?
Second.
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Sheniga?
Yes. Well, come along. It's nice to have the treasurer here.
And his staff, I do agree.
Duly noted.
I would say it's been a very nice transition.
Thank you.
Is this what you want to talk about? Treasurer wants to unlock power of Ohio's $20 billion investment portfolio. I looked for your name in Cranes, but it wasn't there.
Well, give it to me for a minute, I'm gonna give it back to you.
I wouldn't mind reading that. What was that?
In Crane, it's in Cranes.
Oh, it's in Cranes? Yeah, I haven't looked at it. All right, well, great. Well, good morning, and thank you again. And as we all have said, yes, we are delighted to have Treasurer Stidham and his staff also at the Investment Board meeting here today. As we kind of look at this fourth quarter of 2021 and look to move into 2022. The Federal Reserve, of course, met last month, and as part of their meeting last month, which was on the quarterly cycle to provide an update on their forecast, they also provided us with an update on their dot plot, which is a forecast of where the participants of the committee believe is the appropriate level of the overnight rates over the course of the next few years. And so if we look at the dot plot on page 2, we can see that the consensus is that, of course, rates remain unchanged through 2021, but as we get into 2022, they are projecting that we would have our first rate hike, perhaps by the end of 2022. The market is actually viewing the likelihood of this occurring as almost a certainty, and that the likelihood that it will occur by mid-2022 is more likely, we would say. So the market is saying, the sooner the Fed starts to get this rate hike underway, then the slower the pace of those rate hikes. So in essence, just can start to ease these in more as the economy continues to return back to pre-COVID levels. As we look at these dots on 2023 and 2024, we can see that there's a great dispersion of the forecast, and that clearly also leads into what are some of the uncertainties that remain as it relates to the economy, particularly as it relates to inflation, and then, of course, the increase in energy prices that we have started to see of late. And when we think back to spikes in energy prices, those, of course, have a tendency to slow down economic growth because they very quickly become translated into gas prices, which affects the consumer directly. We look at the outlook on the next page. We can see that the Fed is forecasting economic growth, of course, in 2021 has been very strong. That expectations are that economic growth will start to slow down, again, as the economy returns to more normal, which would be that 2.5% to 3% growth range. Unemployment, it continues to remain elevated. Fed has that dual mandate of full employment and stable prices. So clearly, they're focused on the employment picture, and then, of course, inflation. At this stage, the Fed has maintained that inflation, the increase in inflation is due to transitory factors. However, they are starting to express increased concern about the risk that some of these factors will become more permanent, become embedded, and of course, that then translates into, would translate into a need to perhaps, move forward sooner on the hiking interest rates.
Do we know how, are they giving, or do we have any idea what that time frame might be for them as to what, 6 months, a year, what might be a trigger to them to start?
They keep a lot of those details pretty close to the vest.
Oh, they don't talk to you?
Yeah, I didn't get a call from Chairman Powell. Needless to
Maybe you
say.
should be looking for somebody that does, Caleb. We get more up-to-date information. Never know. What does idiosyncratic mean?
Meaning that it's unique, specific to an event. Yeah, you must be on the inflation page.
And I
Yeah,
notice you don't have housing in here, sensitive, under
Right.
sensitive items.
Well, and housing, you're right, we would say is sensitive, has been sensitive to COVID, because we've seen a shift in, housing movement, individuals moving from the West Coast to the Midwest, whereby housing, the cost of housing has increased about 5% as this shift has occurred. So in the past, when we've had spikes in housing, it's been pretty much on the coasts, but this time, due to the pandemic and, folks moving away from the coast, we've had a big increase in the price of housing in the Midwest and even in the South. But again, price of housing, you're right, is reflected in the inflation numbers, but because we're seeing this just kind of a shifting, it's not really identified per se as specific to the pandemic because it's focused in one region, not necessarily, across the whole nation.
But it's went across, and the coasts have went up too, haven't they? In New York and California, and they said their housing costs have escalated also, and it's a lot more than 5 or 10%. Obviously, our auditor just came back and raised real estate prices across the county, 11% or across the board. And I thought, well, how does that just happen? Well, everything went up 11%. He fought hard to get it from 13%, which was what the state recommended, and got it only to 11%.
Only, right. Yeah. Well, and I think the other factor, and I know we've touched on this before, is that, we look at the inflation numbers and we all have a tendency, we look at those things that we see, but when we dive into really how the calculation is done, things
Yeah,
have different
explain
weights.
that to Caleb. I thought that was a very interesting.
Yeah, so like housing, when we look at the consumer price index, the housing piece, that owner equivalent rent, which is basically they do a calculation to determine, not necessarily the price of housing, like if you go and buy a house, but the equivalent of if you were renting, which takes into consideration we're in a low interest rate environment, so payments really are not that different.
Can I say it a simpler way?
Yes,
So what she's saying is that your ability to afford the house because of the low interest rate means the house isn't really costing more money.
right.
Now, to me, that's crazy. And I think you could say the same thing, so gasoline is not really costing you $3.25 a gallon because you have more money in your pocket, so you can afford to pay the $3.25. And that's how inflation is gauged.
Right.
Does that make sense to you? Because if it does, you're a smarter man than me, because that makes no sense. Because it still costs
Cost more?
$50,000 more to buy the house.
Right.
And in the end,
that's what it costs, more. And I don't understand how,
It's just the way they've chosen to
They're just looking at
define.
the ability you have to purchase goods and services.
Yeah,
Right.
because when they look at the life of the loan, a 30-year
Right.
loan, they look at the interest rate, so the total cost is probably just the same as it was
Oh,
when there was a
yeah.
higher interest rate.
I understand, that's how we sell houses
Yes.
today,
Mhm.
is we say, well, it costs you $50,000 more, consumer,
Mm-hmm.
but don't worry about it, you can get a 3% loan.
It's no different than when you go, the shift that we experienced, this is how I look at it, the shift we experienced when buying cars, when it used to be you would look at the price of the car, and then it translated into the price of the payment, which then translated into, well, you can lease this car.
Which was
For a lower
exactly
amount.
what happened in the last housing bubble in 2008, if you remember correctly. Everybody thought, wow, this is never going to end.
Right.
Well, when the merry-go-round stopped
Yep.
and your ability to pay, you lost your job,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. The $20 an hour job isn't available at Cedar Point anymore. You're going back to
Right.
waitressing for $12 an hour. Oops, now I don't have the money to pay for this very expensive house that just cost me $50,000 more.
Right.
And the bubble bursts.
Right. And that's why when we think in terms of, some of the risks, longer term, to the interest rate environment, to the U.S. economy, which translates into interest rates, that's certainly one of the big risks, is are we in an environment where there's so much money being available to people and companies either through stimulus dollars or through increased wages, which may be temporary, may not be lasting, and people are making long-term decisions, long-term spending goals based off of something that may not be permanent,
Yeah,
and that may be at risk, and that certainly does present a risk to the U.S. economy.
because that's what happened in
Yes.
2008, is all of a sudden, the buyer or the builder was upside down. The value, the appraised price of the house, instead of being $300,000, now the bank came back and said, guess what, this house is only worth $200,000.
Right.
You need to make up the spread of the $100,000.
Yep.
And by the way, that 5% loan that you had, we now demand 20%, so we need that 15% too. And the builder said, here, just take it back.
Right.
I don't want it.
It's, these things go in cycles, which is why the U.S.
It always
economy
does.
continues to experience these periods of, strong economic growth and then recessions. In the past, many times the recessions were very cyclical as it related to manufacturing, but we've moved away from some of that to things more like bubbles.
Do we,
Where-
again, it's timing, and crystal ball is, right, nobody has, but when you talk about the contributions to inflation, the COVID-sensitive items,
Right,
at what point do they stop being COVID-sensitive items and just
Right.
real world? And
Exactly.
would that be enough to cause action from the Fed?
exactly. And that's also one of the risks that the Fed is, when we think back how the communication message they were, giving 3 months ago, which was, oh yes, all of this inflation, pop in inflation is transitory, has now started to shift to, well, yes, there's these transitory items that are COVID-related, idiosyncratic to the pandemic, but, some of these we're starting to see are maybe not going to be transitory, they're going to become embedded, and this is going to become real inflation. So they are recognizing that, perhaps that we will be going through this transition period, and that's going to be the unknown. Okay, we had low inflation, which was due to pandemic, drop in demand for supply, for goods and services. Then we had all the stimulus dollars, everybody had money, they're going out spending, more demand for goods and services. Then we have the supply chain disruptions, which is, we have demand for goods, but we can't get the goods in the country. And the next stage is, how much of this is all going to have lasting power? When we look at the supply chain disruption, and we do have a slide in here, which of course shows the ships, which was something we had talked about, I think, 6 months ago.
Oh, it's a year ago.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's now popular to talk about.
Exactly. I don't know why either, because it's been on our radar that it is certainly a problem to get those ships, to get those goods. And why is it a problem? What is causing the problem? Well, first of all, we had the Evergrande stuck in the Suez Canal that impacted the traffic of the ships. Once that was resolved, though, and we have all these ships backed up, well, why aren't the ports able to get caught up on processing these ships? Well, truck drivers, labor supply.
Well, do you know why you don't have truck drivers? The truck drivers didn't go away.
No,
The truck drivers, the rules changed.
Yes.
And now they can only drive 8 hours.
yes,
So it's not economical for me to, I have friends that are semi-drivers, and they're
Yep.
like, I can't make any money anymore.
Right.
And I used to drive 12 hours a day, and, I could make some dollars. Now I gotta stop for 8 hours, and they
Yep.
log this and blah, blah, blah. It's just, it's not a, it's not a great business.
and it's not just logging it into a handwritten logbook.
No, it's real
Like,
this
it's,
time,
it's
yeah.
all, yeah, electronically monitored.
So,
Yes.
on page 3, though.
Okay.
What you're saying, as far as what we're concerned, the Fed fund rate in '21 is next to 0.
Right,
We don't see it moving really in '22?
maybe one rate hike in 2022,
But minuscule.
minuscule, yes,
And then even going out to what you describe as longer run,
yes.
it's 2.5%.
And that's where we were prior to the pandemic,
Is that what it was?
yes, mhm,
That's what I thought.
yeah.
So that goes back to what year?
Would have been 2018, actually. When we think back, the last rate hike was in 2018. And then in 2019, the Fed did start cutting rates. We did have.
So really,
Yeah.
as far as our investment portfolio goes,
Mhm.
we could project in 3 years that it would be about 18's amount, except you have more money now that
We
you've
have more money.
invested.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
you got like, what, 20 million more, I think, that you invested?
We've
At
gone
10.
from 53 in August of last year to 95.
Yeah.
So 40 million more.
Yeah. Mhm. Right, so as long as, rates continue to rise, we
And
could
this
see a
isn't you,
scenario.
this is the Fed said this.
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Right. And so we know the market, has sometimes a different opinion. And if we look at, if we want to fast forward to page 7, which is the Treasury yield curves, we can see that even out 5 years now, the market has market rates longer term, 5 years back to around 1%. And actually, the 2-year, the 3-year, and the 4-year, are moving, have moved up as well as a result of now this updated Fed forecast.
But again, you're not talking
Twos, no,
big numbers.
no, no. And to the point, and I think when we look at the yield curve here, this tells us, we have the Fed story, and then we have the market story. And the market story is in the yield curve, the Fed story is in their forecasts.
Oh, okay.
And so the market story is, yes, we are entering a period of where rates should be higher, but we have these risks out there that maybe don't necessarily warrant getting rates this quickly back to where we were pre-pandemic. Even when we look at, the 10-year and the 30-year Treasury, they're not back significantly. If we think in terms of if the market truly believed that we would be in an environment of 5% inflation on a continued basis, then it makes no sense to have a 10-year Treasury still below 2%. So the market is telling us that they don't believe all of this inflation will become permanent.
And that they historically kind of slow to go that way, meaning it's kind of a slow climb, but if they're looking forward and they see a cliff potentially ahead, which they did, they cut easily and quickly, but they're going to be very slow to go the other way.
Yeah, the Fed reacts many times in the same manner, very slow to react. The last thing the Fed ever wants to do is, because of their actions, push the U.S. economy into a recession. The market, though, is for the most part going to look to price in the risk. And the risk as it relates to what's the risk for inflation, for economic growth, and what's an appropriate level of interest rates.
Well, it is interesting about, in our little world, that Erie County people spend $200 million more in goods and services, goods, taxable services, sales tax in last year than they did in 19.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just is phenomenal.
So let's think about that. 2020, and even into 2021, due to the pandemic, services, many services were not necessarily available, or people weren't
In
comfortable.
20.
In 20, and
But
even
I'm
in
co-
21.
But I'm comparing it to 19.
Okay, but 19, so are you saying in 19 they spent more in goods?
No, 19
More in
is,
services.
we took in 16 point some million dollars in sales tax. This year, we're gonna take in
Right.
18 point some million dollars in sales tax.
Mhm.
So at 1%, that's $200 million
Mhm. On goods,
on goods,
Right.
more than in a regular
right,
year.
right.
Where does money come from?
Stimulus dollars,
And it's not all necessarily local residents
Right.
either.
Well, it doesn't matter, it still got spent here.
stimulus dollars, and people not spending money on services, but instead spending money on goods. Because you think about it, can you go inside a Chick-fil-A yet? Still have to go through the
But
drive-through.
to-go's not taxable.
I know, but they're not spending, they still have the same money because of stimulus dollars. And so rather, they can't spend it on services, so they're spending it on goods, in addition to the fact they received all the stimulus dollars.
But we
So
did,
this is could potentially be a short-lived event as well. We may see that shift back. Because think about, how many play sets do you need to build in your backyard for your kids? How many additions do you need to add onto your house, or decks, or
It's true,
new
even if somebody's
appliances
spending-
and the like?
They're only buying one of those.
Yeah,
but it's still, you're still talking about taxable items.
Right.
And, you know, the Chick-fil-A, I always joke that the least chicken line is 4 miles long every day. But if you don't pay tax on that, right?
No.
So as long as, and you can't go in and order food anymore, right? Even at
Right.
Chick-fil-A, there's nobody in there. They
Nope.
line up and they get their chicken and go. So, and I know Lowe's is up, and I know the hot tub guy is up, and, but still, that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of
To
money.
be spent $200 million more, and I don't get it. I mean, the hotel bed tax is same, right, Hank?
It's about 10% down from 19.
Yeah,
but
not
it's-
even,
it's pretty
even what it
close.
was at 19. So that means the tourists aren't here.
right.
Well, I think the tourists are here, they're just not staying overnight.
Oh, whatever.
They're driving here, because if you look at the sales tax numbers that we're seeing here, we're the highest in the state, by far, percentage year over year, by far, Erie County.
I don't know that.
Yeah,
Is that true?
massively, because we're at
You mean
30,
increase?
40%, yeah. Nobody else is at that level of an increase from year to year. So that tells me people are driving here to go to the water, to go wherever, and they're spending their money as they come, right? They got a hole in their pocket, it's just pouring out. I mean, everybody's seen an increase, but we have a substantial number
I didn't know
compared
that.
to, you look at those charts that go through the
Yeah.
whole, all the counties.
Yeah.
We are way up compared to the rest of the counties. Everybody's up, but
I
that's
think
been that way pretty much this summer.
Why don't
I think
you
for the
get
summer
with
sales.
sports force too, I mean, you've got a lot of people coming in.
That's true.
Tournaments, I mean, I've been a soccer dad, a
Yeah.
football dad, and I've traveled and went places, and then in those communities, you're going to get food, you're gonna get
Yeah.
clothes, it's a rainy day, oh, I gotta go get an umbrella, so I gotta run to Walmart, I mean, you're kinda getting all this other spending that normally wouldn't have been here without those tournaments.
200 million
Oh,
more?
I agree,
Numbers
the
are
amounts,
crazy.
I mean,
It's
it's off the charts.
It is phenomenal. But I think it's people have shifted their spending from services to goods because all of the services are either not open or not available or haven't been available, but so they just, because the consumer is just a spender.
Well, the other thing is that we're an older population, and so people may have been more spooked by
Yeah.
COVID.
Right. Yeah, that's a factor too.
I have a person that I know that has a jewelry store, and they said that the number of 1.5 carat diamond rings that they're selling is record pace because of COVID.
COVID.
My wife almost died. She deserves this. I've been waiting our whole life. I'm gonna buy it now. Maybe, I don't know.
Well,
So,
I think that mentality or that mindset has probably been applied to a lot of other things. Oh,
Yeah.
geez, we put off doing this, and spending money on this, and COVID has, you know, reminded us that life can be short, because, right, either their wife almost died, or they lost a parent or something, and they go, you only live once, we're gonna do it, we're gonna spend the money. So, interesting times, but a lot of, I'm gonna say, behavioral changes that we've seen throughout COVID, that some of which we believe will carry over post-COVID, almost like Depression era. You know, which, you know, this has just been, you know, it's been such a change, such a departure to how people live their lives.
You mean
And I-
i.e., I don't have to work anymore?
That reckoning day may be coming too,
Oh,
though.
you want me there every day? No, I don't think so.
Well, and that's interesting, because, you know, when we look at the employment picture, you know, if employment growth continues at the same pace that we experienced last month, it will take until first quarter of 2022, or July of 2022, wherever that chart, to get back to pre-pandemic levels. I'm sorry, it goes into 2023 if we're at the monthly rate. If we're at the 3-month rate, the average, it takes still mid-2022. So again, to your point, right, people are not returning to work. Now, is this because of the capacity of the child care is not back up to speed? And this is almost like a catch-22. Well, I can't go back to work until there's child care, but if I work in child care, I can't go back to work until there's child care. So, you know, how is this going to pan out? You know, it's kind of one of those $64,000 questions
Yeah.
that, just with time.
I think we're stuck between, I don't want to go back to work, compared to, I don't have to go back to work, for whatever reason.
Right, exactly.
They just feel they don't have to go back to work.
Right. Yeah, and again, behavioral changes. Oh, geez. We received stimulus dollars, we spent money on the things that reasons I was working for, and now I'm at home, I have children at home, we're surviving. I don't have to go back to work now. You know, there could, and that's whether it's male or female.
And
So
that
again-
goes along with the business who's struggled, almost went out of business. They figured out how to redo what they do, and now all of a sudden they look up and go, I don't have to do what I did before. I can do this.
Right.
And then that may involve 5 fewer people,
Right.
or something equivalent to.
Exactly. Yeah, so when we just look at the county's investment portfolio, at the end of September, the portfolio yield was 0.91. I'm looking at page 11 here. And we compare that to where we were at the end of July, where the portfolio yield was at 0.88. So we've had a little bit of a uptick as we've been reinvesting funds, taking advantage of a little higher interest rate environment. With the $10 million that came in on October 1st out of the cash piece, those monies are also being put back to work.
That's why the portfolio went up $12 million. I'm
from
looking at the
April
total
to-
portfolio when you go from 118 down to 130. You went from 112 to 118, so 6 million, then it went from 118 to 130 million.
I think
I'm-
that's just cyclical. So the
Well,
total
But it's still
is
going
cash.
up.
Right.
And I was wondering, is that because, didn't we get 14 million, or no, we got 7 million?
Oh,
plus
ARPA.
4 million. So we got 11 million from our friend,
Right.
and that's why that moved
Yes.
that much.
Yes, that would make sense. Right, because that would have come in May,
Yes.
that ARPA money,
Okay.
right after the end of April, right. Kind of forget about that, right? And the July numbers, of course, would have been reflective of tax dollars that had not been paid out yet.
Yeah, I never look at that when I look at once it settles down.
Right.
But I think you're right about that,
Yes.
where that extra actual number comes from. But I think looking at the weighted average yields over time and then the maturity rates over time, those are the bigger picture. I mean, clearly we're concerned about the bottom line, but
Right.
those are the ones to look at, to make sure that we're going to be able to take advantage of a
Right.
situation if it occurs next year, late next year, or the year after.
Right,
Where's your
exactly.
forecast on what that does? See that?
So if you flip back one page to page, or 2 pages to page 9, which shows the portfolio distribution. And Steve, to your point, we had, 30% of the portfolio maturing within a year, which gives us plenty of opportunities to take advantage of, changing interest rate environment and adjust the strategy, which we still think it's prudent to have about 40% maturing beyond 3 years. But to your point, Pat, with a portfolio yielding 0.91, what does that do for interest income? And the estimated annual interest income for
Is 820.
basically for 2022 would be 800,000.
And I think it was 700, wasn't it, last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
So a little bit more.
So a combination, right, of more dollars invested, of course, earning a higher rate than if they were maintained, say, in the liquid options, which will be anchored to the Fed movements. In Star Ohio, which is the highest yielding liquid option that the county is using, is still under 0.10%.
Mhm.
And we don't see that moving appreciably until the Fed actually does increase that overnight rate.
Or the state changes the rules that we can buy Apple stock.
Well, yeah.
The state treasurer's office here to advocate for that.
Talk to him about that.
Star up, okay?
Yes, I'm very familiar with some of
You're
those.
next, pal.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
It's gonna be a walk in the park coming here, didn't you? I'm gonna go talk to those bumpkins in Erie County, yeah, all right, we'll get it.
We do need to look at the investment.
Oh, yes.
policy proposal changes.
Yeah, so I'll speak briefly on that. So we have not updated our investment policy since March of 2002. So we thought it was long past time to update this. All of this applies with all the Ohio Revised Code statutes, and I think really emphasizes our policies that we want safety and return. So that's what this says. It's pretty short, and it also clarifies, in case there's any confusion, that the treasurer is the investing authority of the county, which is also compliant with Ohio Revised Code statute.
We were never confused about that. I make a motion, we approve
I'll second that. But is there any mechanical things included in this? Meaning, when you talk about the policies, is there a mechanical thing included in this that says, if this threshold is met, we do this, invest this or this? Or you just, which you kind of explained, the bigger picture of, the policies in place so everybody knows?
It's the bigger picture.
Okay.
And so there's, the Ohio Revised Code specifically, what we can invest in, the percentages of what we can invest in.
And it just spells it out because it hasn't been done in 20 years.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think technically, and I looked this up, so the policy is passed by the Investment Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for a point of order, I don't know the extent of
I
that.
see what
I'll
you're saying.
second.
I see what you're saying.
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Stidham?
Yes.
Mr. Sheniger?
Motion to go back into the county commission meeting?
Second.
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Sheniger?
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We're gonna listen to Pat.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got an audience. So I take it I'm up now?
You are, and
Right.
so I want to ask you about this.
Can't see that far. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Here's some- Okay. Thank you.
Oh, another Pat.
Yes.
You go by Pat or Patrick?
Pat,
Yeah, I do too.
Patrick when my wife is mad at me.
I would rather be Patrick than Pat, if I could do it over again.
Why is
The
that?
kids today are full
Duly
names.
noted. That's true, they are.
I just think it sounds more professional than Pat. And remember the Saturday Night Live skit?
Oh, yeah, I still get that. I get that a lot, so.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me here today. I am Pat McCauley, the Public Affairs Liaison for State Treasurer of Ohio, Robert Sprague. And I'm just on my tour after the pandemic, after sitting on my couch for a year and a half, getting back out and just reintroducing myself to all the elected officials in my 23 counties that I cover. So it takes me a while to get around to everybody. But just wanted to stop by and
talk about a couple of the programs that the Treasurer's Office has, and also see if there's anything else that we can do to help out the county. I know I met with Treasurer Stidham last week or the week before, and we are trying to get those star rates back up, but sometimes our hands are tied, but we're doing our best for that. So I understand that the county fared pretty well through the pandemic with sales tax and such, which is a good thing. So we were happy to see the success here in Erie County. But the two programs that I just wanted to highlight for you this morning are the ones on the right-hand side of the folder. The first one being OMAP, which is the Ohio Market Access Program. That allows government entities and special districts to use the credit rating of the state to get reduced financing rates for short-term capital projects. So if you're looking to purchase new vehicles, it could be used for that. Any construction, road work, it's anything that's, can be considered capital basically. And the Treasurer's Office, we stand behind that note that you take out for it. And if for some reason you can't roll that over, we step in and set up a payment plan through the Treasurer's Office to save on penalties and such.
Is it that much cheaper than what we could do it? Do you know, Hank?
It just depends on what the project is and what kind of financing you
Depends
get.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
As in total size amount, like,
Yeah, like if you're just buying vehicles, I mean,
gotcha,
how risky is it?
gotcha.
What if you were doing a $14 million sewer project?
Yeah, probably wouldn't qualify as a short-term project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are smaller things.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's,
Probably
I've
doesn't
seen,
apply to us, really.
well, there could be things coming up, but you probably also get questions from townships and such, about possibilities. So it's just a nice little bit of information for you to have in your back pocket, just in case you are approached by another entity within the county, that you can turn them on to that. We've seen communities save $2,000, $20,000 or more dollars in financing costs through this program. So we like to call it the hidden treasure of the hidden treasure of the Treasurer's Office. So that it's just a nice program that we just like getting the word out on. So, and if you ever have questions on it or run into anybody that has questions on it, feel free to forward them to me, and I can help them out as bad, and our folks in Columbus can as well. The next program are stable accounts. October is Disability Workforce Month, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that. I don't know if you're familiar with stable accounts, but they are similar to a 529 account that allows individuals to save money for anything that's going to improve the quality of their life if they have a disability. So for example, if you're a parent and your child has a disability, you can open up an account for them and start saving money in it, so when they're older, they can have that money to fall back on to help out with everyday living expenses. Anybody can put money into an individual's stable account, so it can be parents, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, friends, neighbors, it doesn't matter. And if that individual is able to work, they can put money into their own stable account. The great thing is that what money is in a stable account does not affect what that person would be receiving in federal benefits through SSI and Medicaid. So right now, if you have a disability and you're receiving that money, if you have over $2,000 in assets, they take away what your benefits. Now, $2,000 doesn't give you much spending power or savings power. And if you're an individual that you can drive, you're not going to get a very good car for $2,000.
What does it do for the elderly? Like, say, an aging parent, can a person put money into this account knowing my mom or dad's going to be in a nursing home?
It would have to be for an individual with a disability. And that
Isn't in a nursing home a disability?
well, the disability has to have occurred before the age of 26.
Oh, that's.
So that's where that comes in.
Because that's one thing you guys should look at is that, you know, that's the biggest problem you have with, as our population is aged, and we have a very old population in Erie County, is it's affected by their Medicaid or Medicare reimbursement if you have too much
You
money.
know, I will bring that up to the treasurer in our investment department to see if there's anything out there that can help those kind of individuals out too, or if there's ever anything on the horizon that we may be looking at doing.
Yeah.
That could have a significant impact to us, meaning Erie.
Oh,
County,
yeah, absolutely,
population-based.
absolutely.
Ohio isn't, somebody told me the state of Ohio is the oldest workforce of the 50 states.
Really?
True?
I'll look into the crowd, see if anyone knows.
John, is it?
Absolutely.
John says that it must exist. Must
John
exist.
is our historian.
Well, I will look into that for us to see if there's something out there or if any other states are doing anything like that. I don't know. But for the individuals with the disability, this is a great program for them to be able to save the money and live a higher quality of life when they're older and such.
Yeah.
What
Send this to Carrie at our MRDD.
Yeah.
'cause
Yes,
The families
yes.
would like this.
What we were able to launch over during the pandemic is now through the treasurer's office, we can offer a direct deposit option to employers, such as the county, any business in town, that if you want to provide this as an added benefit to your employees, to be able to do a direct deposit option from their paycheck into a stable account, we can set that up for you now. It's at no cost to the county. We provide all the paperwork that you would need to distribute to people. We would do training sessions to explain to individuals how the program works, who qualifies and such. So if that's ever anything that the county would be interested in offering to your employees, let us know, because it's real easy to set up. Only thing that would need to be done on your part is the county would need to pass a memorandum of understanding that you're entering into a partnership with the treasurer's office to offer this program. So if that's something that you think would be of use to your employees, please let us know. We'd be happy to set that up for you.
Okay.
And you had a question about the
Well, it's-
Ohio gains.
Yeah, well, the Ohio, it says unlock the power of a $20 billion investment portfolio. And it looks like you're going to invest in hospitals?
There are three prongs to the Ohio gains. One is to help out hospitals with their debt. The other is for your state higher education institutions. And the third is with our AgLink program.
What?
AgLink, that is a link deposit program that allows, it's pretty much a prepay for the agriculture season. So for example, the window for AgLink to apply for it is like the middle of January to the middle of March. And a farmer will go buy their feed, their seed, and anything, fertilizer, anything they need for the upcoming season. And they would use that loan to purchase that material. Then at the end of the season, they would pay it back and pay it off. Right now, it's capped at $150,000. In the agriculture industry, that's
Not much.
not much at all, especially if you have to buy a new tractor.
Borrowed from the treasury to save
No, they work through a local financial institution, and the treasurer's office will buy a CD at a reduced rate and pass that savings along to the individual that's asking for the financing. That way, the bank's not losing any money. The farmer is getting what they need, and the treasurer's office is using our bottom line to help them out, using our portfolio to assist them. So it is currently working its way through the legislature to see if we can implement this, but it's going to be a win-win for especially the agriculture industry.
So like a farmer, if he goes to the bank to borrow this $150,000, would he pay 5-6% interest maybe?
What it could do is, for example, if it is 5 to 6%, through the AgLink program, they could get up to a 3% reduction
Because you buy the CD
at a reduced rate.
2%.
Yes, and we
you
pass
give
that.
them 3%, a rebate check back to the farmer?
No, they just work that into the financing. So instead of financing at 5%, it would be at 2%.
Is that new?
No, it's been around for a long time. A lot of farmers take advantage of it. There is a sheet in your folder there on all our different AgLink, all our link deposit programs. We have several for businesses. One, if you're going to be expanding in terms of square footage or bringing on new vehicles, doing IT infrastructure rewiring. Another, if you're bringing on new employees, you can bring up to 4 part-time employees or 2 full-time employees. You can get financing to help with that. The fourth one on the sheet is for homeowners, to where if you're going to do anything to increase the property value of your home, you can get up to $50,000 in financing, and that could go for new windows, new furnace, adding on a new garage, redoing the kitchen. So they're nice little programs that we have, and there's one that's coming up too that we hope to be able to make an announcement on, called Family Forward, that is going to help individuals and families who are wanting to adopt to be able to get reduced financing to help out with the costs of for their family and such. So
Why are the amounts so low, Pat? I mean, it seems like, like a business, it's $500,000 or something. Why isn't it 5 million or 10 million or?
I think that's what it was set at when these were first approved.
You ought to get them higher.
yeah.
I mean, that's not a lot of money anymore.
Well, we're trying to with the AgLink.
But do them for all,
Yeah.
because there's really not a lot of risk for you if she's right on the forwards, on the CD rate. You ought to be able to make that maybe even variable. Because most of your banks today, when they're gonna loan, $5 million over a 10-year period for whatever the guy's gonna do, most of them aren't doing fixed rate anyway. They'll try and do a float, which you could tie your CD to the float to. It would just adjust as it went along. I mean, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It really is. But
Yeah, I'll see if they've,
it'd be more.
yeah, I don't know if they've ever considered that, but it'd probably be something that would have to go through the legislature to be approved, just like the AgLink that we're doing now. But yeah, I'll look into that as well. Be happy to.
Good. Well, you've got a lot of work we've given you, so you better get at it.
Hey, I'm a working man, so
There you
I can
go.
do it. But if there's anything that comes up for the county, that you think the treasurer's office can help out with, just feel free to reach out. I try to pop in every so often, and now that I'm allowed to drive around again, I'll try to get by a little bit more regularly than I did for the past year and a half. So my card's in there. Caleb knows how to find me, so feel free to reach out. Be happy to assist you in any way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Coming.
Hank, did you have anything? You have some resolutions?
Dave. Motion first to award the bid to Warner Mechanical for the jail HVAC renovation?
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Yes. Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
Move for adoption resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of authorizing the county auditor to make budget modifications and supplemental appropriations.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Yes. Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
Move for adoption resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of entering into an agreement with Northwest Group Services Agency.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Yes. Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
Move for adoption resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of entering into an agreement with Direct Supply.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Yes. Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
Move for adoption resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of entering into an agreement with All Phase Power and Lighting.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Yes. Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
Move for adoption resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of executing payment of then and now certification.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Yes. Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
Move for adoption resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of adopting the Erie County Prevention, Retention, and Contingency Plan.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old? Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.
That's it? That's it.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Shennigo?
Yes.